supposed to die that night. You're the one who resurrected me, Doctor.
Originally, I planned to make a video that reviewed the anime Monster in its entirety. After watching several reviews and analyses of the show, however, I realized that most of the praise I was giving was already said, especially when it comes to its characters. Most of Monster's cast are brilliantly written figures whose struggles keep the audience captivated and highly sympathetic toward them. They truly reinforce the series' main theme that all lives are equal and deserving of love. But, as I'm sure you can see from the title of this video, there's one blue-eyed blondie psychopath who kinda ruins that lesson for me. While this video will mainly be a criticism of the series, especially its core theme, I overall think it's a good anime that's worth watching, or reading if you like manga. In fact, my original video's purpose was to reignite an interest in Monster with modern audiences. Since I've changed course, what's my new goal then? Essentially, it's to take all those videos doing deep dives into Johann Liebert and the series' themes and tell them they're wrong.
That's a joke, lads.
I'm not trying to bully anyone who disagrees with my evaluation here, but I think it's good for Monster's highly acclaimed villain and its main theme to be viewed from a different angle than they usually are. There are a lot of great analyses of the show out there, and I want to bring something new to the table. With that being said,
let's get right into the
gun.
I'll start by talking about what I like about this twisted psychopath. For all intents and purposes, I don't think Johann is just a serviceable villain. I actually think he's a good one. He's the best in the series when he acts off-screen and as a force of nature. Like a classic slasher, he's the most threatening when you have no idea what he's up to. When he's masked by the shadows, pulling the strings behind all the characters' backs, Johann Liebert is a true threat to every single person who gets in his way. So when he finally does show up on screen, it's terrifying. He's the embodiment of pure evil, a man with no remorse for his actions who wants nothing more than to watch the world and everyone in it burn. So, where did this cool character wind up going wrong? I think the first problem is that he appears way too much on screen midway through the show. A large portion of the show's tension has to do with Johann's appearances, or lack thereof. Take a look at his first appearance as an adult. He is shrouded entirely in the darkness. We don't get to see his face until the very end of the scene. It's extremely dramatic, makes Johann look ominous, and reinforces his mysteriousness. His mystery is maintained until we get to the Munich University arc, where he appears more or less in several episodes in a row. He's still creepy, but it takes away from the initial power he held as a more shadowy puppet master sort of character. This is more of a nitpick, but when he starts appearing on the television broadcast in the show, it kinda messes with his pre-established methods of maintaining secrecy, at least in my opinion. But my main criticism here is that his more mysterious aura could have been maintained if he had less screen time in the middle of the series. The reason I bring up Johann's screen time is that it ties directly into the main problem I have with him. Well, not with him, but more so how he gets treated at the end of the show. Most of the people who have problems with Monster's ending think that it is rushed and ends disappointingly, with Tenma holding back that sweet catharsis of finally showing Johann's whiny baby face. My issue is not either of these things, though it is closer to the latter. My criticism isn't that it ends with Johann being saved by Tenma again, I like the bookend parallel of it all actually, but rather how the show expects us to view Johann as a result. Let me explain. In Monster's climax, Dr. Tenma, after 73 episodes of his hellbent crusade to take down Johann, refuses to shoot him. Okay, I can still get down with that. Even though Johann orchestrated an entire attack against a small town to achieve his so-called perfect suicide and include the mass murder of innocent families and children, it seems that Tenma's philosophy of believing the goodness and worthiness of all humans has shown through. Then Nina shows up and forgives Johann for everything he's done. Also okay. I mean, in the end, Johann is still her brother, so I can see why she'd feel obliged to forgive him. But then Johann holds the child at gunpoint to egg Tenma into shooting him, and Tenma still won't budge. Okay. So the kid's drunk dad does it for him. Lol. After that, Tenma saves him again. Fine. It's the next part where I start to have major problems. In episode 74, the epilogue, everyone just seems to forgive and forget the whole Johann mass murdering hundreds of people thing. At the episode's end, Tenma visits the seemingly comatose Johann, and the scene pretty much plays out like, "Your mommy loves you a lot, but maybe not. Bye!" I'm bringing all this up because, despite everything that Johann has done, the show leaves one with the impression that we, the audience, are supposed to follow the characters and let Johann off the hook with what's more or less a slap on the wrist. The show's main theme is that all human lives are equal, and one shouldn't be valued more than the other. Johann's philosophy is in direct contrast to this idea, as it should be given he is the antagonist, but here's the problem. As far as I can tell, the author couldn't decide if he wanted to make Johann a pure symbol or force of evil and fear, or a humanized villain. And here's the thing about that. If the show was ambiguous about how you should feel about him, it would be one thing, but it's painfully obvious that you're supposed to feel bad for Johan and forgive him, given the fact that Nina forgives him, Tenma won't shoot him and saves him again, and Tenma goes out of his way to tell Johan that his mother still loves him, and he pretty much forgives him. When I was first planning out this video, I knew there was something off about the final impression Monster left me with, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. I thought about other antagonists, ones that I particularly like, and wondered what it was about them that made them different from Johan. And that's when I realized, the problem has everything to do with sympathy. Let's compare Johan to another one of anime's most beloved antagonists, Dio from JoJo. These two are pretty similar. They're both blonde, obnoxious European boys who are slightly fruity.
This is definitely fruity.
They're also mass murderers who manipulate everyone around them for their own gains. What about them is different, I wondered, aside from At first, I thought it was because Dio is a highly emotional, expressive character, whereas Johan lacks emotion. But that wasn't quite right. Then I realized, it's the way the authors expect us to view them. One of the reasons I think Dio is such a well-written villain, at least in part 1, actually has to do with sympathy. Dio was given all the sympathy in the world. Dead mom, grew up dirt poor, raised by a drunk abusive father, yet Hirohiko Araki never expects me to sympathize with Dio whatsoever. The evil of his actions completely overrides any feelings of pity we might have had for him. Dio had a chance to live a good life with the Joestars, but instead he throws it all away for his greed and lust for power. And the one time he does try to evoke sympathy, he's lying through his crooked British teeth. Ain't no way I'm feeling bad for this guy. Conversely, Urasawa is on its hands and knees begging you to feel bad for Johan. But why should I? Every single other character in Monster is far more sympathetic. A lot of them have gone through the same things, if not worse things than Johan. Hell, Johan kills some of the characters that we grow to sympathize with. Many of Monster's fans point out that Johan's issues stem from a lack of a true identity. This makes some sense, except Grimmer went through the same brainwashing process at 501 Kinderheim. He has no memories of his childhood, was at Kinderheim longer than Johan was, and dies without ever knowing his origins. One could argue that different people react to trauma in different ways, but I have a hard time accepting that considering Johan was killing people before Kinderheim. Anyway, the rest of the cast has some sort of redeeming quality or motivation that makes me understand or relate to them. Johan has no redeeming qualities. Every single other person does. Even Roberto. Yes, I mean Roberto. Roberto, though incredibly evil, has at least one redeeming quality. Loyalty. He is fiercely loyal to Johan and wants to see Johan's vision even unto death. And that sort of dedication is admirable. Roberto is a terrible human being, but it's hard not to respect that sort of devotion to his goals. In contrast, Johan never returns this loyalty to anyone, not even to Nina, and I'll get to that in a bit. If the situation called for it, Johan would drop Roberto like a stone. But what about other villains that lack redeeming qualities? Like the Joker, I hear you ask. I wouldn't be making points of redeeming traits if the show didn't demand I sympathize with someone who doesn't have any. In the Batman stories, that I like, the author doesn't expect me to sympathize with the Joker. In some I've given the option, but the story doesn't push me into that corner to suit its themes. Even in Todd Phillips' Joker, though Arthur Fleck is extremely sympathetic, the tone suggests that, though you can feel bad for him, in no way do his awful experiences excuse his immoral actions. Alright, so Johan doesn't have any sympathetic qualities. But he's mentally ill! He has a personality disorder, you might say. Except Johan knows the difference between what is socially, morally, and lawfully correct. That's the whole point of his actions, to show that those things don't matter. If this was a man mentally incapable of knowing what was right and wrong, he wouldn't continually hide in the shadows and plot his next moves like a supervillain. Long story short, Johan is everything but criminally insane. His psychopathy doesn't excuse his behavior in any way. Even if it did, he's still obviously a danger to society and should at the very least be put into some sort of institution. But what about Nina? Doesn't Johan care about Nina? The only person who seems to think Johan cares about Nina is Nina. My problem with the argument about Johan loving Nina is that Johan is a master manipulator. We can't trust a single thing Johan says because there's always a chance he's just trying to get his way. Everything Johan does in the series is for his own gain. He doesn't do a single good thing out of kindness or selflessness. Another thing I'd like to point out about Johan and Nina's relationship is at no point are Johan's feelings toward Nina positive or selfless. Johan's obsession with his sister is just that, an obsession. I never saw Johan's treatment of her as anything familial or fraternal. My view was that he pretty much saw her as an object, something to be possessed in his twisted game. Also, in episode 67, he literally leaves her to die with a gun pointed to her head. Some brother, huh? As I stated earlier, Monster's problem isn't that Johan is a bad villain, it's that they try to make a character that has nothing sympathetic about him sympathetic. If you want Johan to be sympathetic, maybe don't give off the impression that he was born evil and compare him to the Antichrist. Twice. And don't say that he has an aura of
absolute evil.
If you're going to make me feel bad for Johan, give me something to help me aside from mommy issues and possible mental illness. Neither of those things adds up to much considering this is a man who murdered hundreds of innocent people, mostly children, directly or via manipulation, and left others with horrific mental scars. Johann's motivation for doing these things, as far as we know, is just for the heck of it, and maybe because he hates himself and doesn't believe in anything. For some reason, people seem to think this is really deep and cool. I'm sorry, Johann fanboys, but this dude isn't all that deep. And yes, your comments about how Johann would totally beat Light Yagami with facts and logic are a good sign that Johann is Edge incarnate.
You like Huey Lewis on the news?
I'm not trying to dunk on you if you think Johann is great, but he doesn't have much to him. I think that's another problem with him. Revealing Johann's whole backstory is part of unraveling the show's mysteries. I get that. But the problem is that it makes Johann less intimidating and, frankly, more pathetic once you learn about him. As I said, when he's mysterious and more inhuman, he's at his best. Let me think and ponder about why he could be doing what he's doing instead of just slapping a "he wants to die" in his depressed label. Having a one-dimensional and one-sided antagonist isn't a bad thing as long as that antagonist is building up the protagonist, which Johann does pretty well up until the ending. Overall, my biggest problem with Monster is the weak sympathy bait it assaults you with at the end. Johann seems to get a pass from the show just because all lives are equal. Even though Johann is a monster, he's still human. This sort of logic led me to ask one question that I don't think the show or manga ever intended for anyone to think. The question I kept asking myself as Monster drew to a close, and that I was hoping it would answer, was that if all lives are equal, at what point does the value of a life become disproportionate to the suffering that life has caused? Is it when one life is taken? 2? Is there a line that can be drawn? Does it depend on the intensity or malice of the killer? Can something other than murder create this disproportion? The main question is sidestepped by the series in favor of the broad stroke theme we got. Johann took multiple innocent lives in brutal fashion, and, as far as the series shows, has no remorse for his actions in any way. Johann's crimes do not mean he has to die in the show, but he needs to face some kind of repercussions. I think Monster would be more effective if there was at least one character who encouraged Tenma or Nina to kill Johann. Every single person these characters meet who learns about Johann tells them not to do it, because that would just be bad, okay? I was waiting for just one person not named Johann to say, "You know what, Tenma? Go kill that guy. He sucks." Instead, everyone encourages Tenma to not kill Johann because it would make Tenma a bad person, even though Tenma killing Johann would pale in comparison to everything Johann has done. Consequently, if Tenma killing someone who has killed others makes him bad, what about Johann's life? Is Tenma killing Johann bad just because it's bad for Tenma, not because a life would be taken? That's the impression I got. Despite all the show's sympathy begging in favor of Johann, it seems that they don't want to kill him just because it would reflect negatively on Tenma, not because Johann is a unique person that deserves a chance to live. It's not about the loss of life, it's about Tenma trying to be a good boy, because good people never kill other people, even if their lives or the lives of others are directly threatened. Am I right? What I'm trying to say here is that Johann's near-instant forgiveness is unearned. He has nothing to show that he is worthy of redemption. The only person that I can see forgiving Johann so quickly is Nina, because, despite everything, they are still siblings. But he still left her to die. As we all know, actions speak louder than words. Johann could say he is very, very sorry for being such a naughty boy, but that doesn't mean anything. If Johann was real, a lot of people would say that he would eventually pay for his actions, whether in this life or the next. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the universe would eventually come to collect for Johann. I know life isn't fair. Killers get away with murder, corruption runs rampant in places where it shouldn't, and people leave their fellow man in the dust all the time. But there's nothing that leads me to believe that Johann should have any kind of forgiveness. Why should I feel any kind of sympathy for a man who has no sympathy for anyone else, not even for himself? Monster highlights the best and worst of humanity. Still, I wish it had more to dig into when it comes to drawing a line somewhere with the value of life. As a villain, Johann Liebert needed more direction. From what I can tell, Urasawa wanted to have Johann be an utterly remorseless and unforgivable killer at the start, more like a symbol of evil than a person, but realized it contradicted his theme that all lives are equal and can change. Thus, he hastily made everyone forgive Johann just so Johann's nihilism couldn't win, and left us with less a theme of human equality and more of a theme of killing people bad. I think that the ending would be more effective if Tenma did shoot Johann, but, instead of Johann dying, Tenma saves him once again after discovering he survived. That way, Tenma could really resurrect him after nearly killing him himself. I mean, Tenma already thought he had killed Roberto before, and held guns on several people throughout the show so they would do what he wanted, but nah, those people don't go into the equality equation. Long story short, if you're going to make an antagonist, you need to decide from the get-go whether that villain is going to be an actual character with vices and virtues, or a force that doesn't have any real personality. Johan spends most of the series as a force, but his half-hearted humanization is ultimately what ruins him and causes the show's theme to fall flat, at least for me. Maybe if Johan did something selfless like save his fellow orphans from 501 Kinderheim, show some kind of care for Nina, or display genuine remorse for some of his crimes. At the end of the day, Monster's theme is not a bad one at all. Honestly, it's a great one to have in an age where most media is dark and edgy because dark horror nothing matters, aren't we so deep? I would be able to appreciate it more, however, if that theme was truly reflected in Johan. Something to show that maybe there is hope, even for a psychotic killer like him.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.